The sentence. The room was silent, the air thick with tension. All eyes were on her. An alien, standing alone before the cold, unfeeling tribunal. Her name was Zora, and today her fate would be decided. The council of alien leaders sat high above, their cold, emotionless gazes fixed on her. They had no mercy, no room for second chances. Zara knew what was coming, but it didn't make it any easier to face. She had heard the rumors, the whispers about what happened to those who stood before the tribunal. The punishment was always swift, always final. She had broken the law, a law that was set by the most powerful beings in the galaxy. There was no turning back now. The leader of the tribunal, a tall, thin creature with glowing eyes, stood up slowly. His voice echoed through the large chamber, cold and heavy. "Zara of the humans," the alien leader began, "you have been accused of crimes against the Galactic Order. The evidence is clear. Your actions are unforgivable." Zara stood tall, despite the fear that gripped her heart. She had done nothing wrong, at least nothing that deserved this punishment. But the tribunal had already made up its mind. Her crime: helping a group of refugees escape the Empire's control. It was a small act of defiance, but one that had angered the wrong people. Now she was paying the price. Zara's mind raced as she listened to the tribunal leader continue. His words were harsh and cruel, but she hardly heard them. The weight of the moment was too much to bear. She could feel the eyes of the council members on her, each one staring down with judgment and disdain. She had no defense, no one to speak for her. Her thoughts turned to Earth, the planet she had once called home. It seemed so far away now, a distant memory. Earth was a peaceful place, full of people who had learned to live in harmony with nature. But when the aliens had arrived, everything changed. Zara had been one of the first humans to come into contact with them. At first, they seemed friendly, offering advanced technology in exchange for cooperation. But it didn't take long for Zara to realize that their cooperation came with a price. The aliens had enslaved her people, forcing them to work in mines and factories, building the Empire's weapons and ships. Zara couldn't stand to watch it. She knew that the aliens had no intention of allowing humanity to live freely. They wanted to break the spirit of her people, to turn them into nothing more than tools for their own use. That was something Zara could never accept. The memories of those dark days flooded her mind, but she quickly pushed them aside. There was no time for regrets now. She had made her choice. She had joined a small resistance movement, fighting back in whatever way she could. It was a dangerous path, but Zara had always been willing to take risks. "Zara," the leader's voice cut through her thoughts. "Your sentence is clear. You are to be executed for your actions. There will be no mercy." Zara's heart sank. She had known it was coming, but hearing it said out loud made it feel real. She was going to die. Her body stiffened, but she refused to let her fear show. The tribunal might think they had won, but they didn't know her. They didn't know what she was capable of. A murmur passed through the crowd of alien spectators, a wave of disbelief. Some of them were surprised. Others seemed indifferent, as though Zara's life meant nothing to them. She had always been an outsider in this world. She wasn't even a member of their species, and they saw her as less than nothing. But Zara wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing her broken. She had fought too hard to give up now. There was still a chance, a small chance, that someone might come for her. Maybe there was someone out there who cared. Maybe a human soldier would come to her aid. She held on to that hope, even if it was just a tiny spark in the darkness. As the tribunal leader raised his hand, signaling the guards to take her away, Zara's mind raced. There had to be a way out of this. She couldn't die here, not without a fight. But what could she do? She was outnumbered, surrounded by enemies. The only thing she had was her will to survive. Suddenly, the doors to the tribunal chamber slammed open. Zara's head snapped up. Her heart skipped a beat. Was it a rescue? Had someone come for her? The crowd gasped in surprise as a human soldier stepped into the room, his eyes locked onto Zara. He was tall, with a look of determination on his face. His uniform was torn, and he was covered in dust, as though he had been through a battle. Zara's heart beat faster. Could this be it? Was this the human she had been hoping for? The soldier stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the tribunal. He didn't say a word, but his presence was enough. He was here to save her. But how? What could he do against the entire tribunal? Stop! The soldier's voice rang out, strong and clear. The alien leader turned to face him, his glowing eyes narrowing. This is not your place, human. Leave now, or you will face the same fate as this traitor. But the human didn't back down. He stood tall, his face hard as stone. I'm not leaving without her. Zara's breath caught in her throat. The human was risking everything for her. It was a chance, a slim one, but it was the only chance she had. The tension in the room was unbearable. Zara had no idea what would happen next, but she could feel something shifting. Maybe, just maybe, the human soldier would be the one to save her from the tribunal's wrath. The human's plan. The silence in the chamber was deafening after the soldier's words. The air crackled with tension, as if the very walls of the tribunal's hall were holding their breath. Zara's heart raced in her chest. Who was this man? How had he made it this far? And what was his plan? The tribunal leader, a towering figure with a sharp, angular face, scowled at the human. His voice, cold and cruel, cut through the silence. You dare to challenge the judgment of the Galactic Council. You will regret this, human. The leader's words were like a death sentence, yet the soldier stood unfazed, his eyes locked on Zara. His jaw tightened, and he took a step forward, as if daring the tribunal to act. I'm not leaving without her, he repeated, his voice steady and full of conviction. The room seemed to shrink with the weight of his words. His defiance was a spark in the otherwise sterile, oppressive atmosphere. Zara, still shackled and standing in the center of the room, couldn't believe what was happening. She had spent days, weeks, feeling alone in a world that wanted her dead. But now, this man, a stranger, was willing to risk his life for her. Was it truly possible that someone cared enough to fight for her freedom? Before the tribunal could react, the soldier made his move. With a quick motion, he reached to his side, pulling out a small glowing device. It was nothing like the weapon she had seen the alien guards carry, but something about it seemed dangerous, powerful. The tribunal's members shifted in their seats, murmuring among themselves. Some appeared confused, others curious, but none of them made any move to stop the soldier. It seemed as if they were waiting for him to make his next move, perhaps hoping to catch him off guard. But the human didn't falter. His gaze never wavered from Zara. I'm going to get you out of here, he said, his words calm, but with an undeniable urgency. His eyes softened as he looked at her, as if trying to reassure her that everything would be okay. But Zara didn't know if she could believe him. Could anyone stand against the tribunal? The leader of the tribunal finally spoke again, his tone filled with a mixture of anger and disbelief. You have no idea what you are dealing with, human. Your kind is weak. You can't fight the Empire. You will fail, just like the others. The soldier did not respond. Instead, he pressed a button on his device, and the lights in the room flickered. For a moment, everything went dark. A gasp rose from the crowd, and Zara's heart skipped. Was this part of the plan? Was the soldier truly able to do this? The darkness lasted only a few seconds, but it was long enough. When the lights flickered back on, Zara could see it. The guards, once stationed at every corner, were now on the ground, unconscious, their weapons scattered across the floor. Zara's breath caught in her throat. The soldier had done it. He had somehow disabled the entire security system. How had he known what to do? Was he an expert? Was he part of the resistance that fought against the Empire? Before anyone could react, the soldier rushed to Zara, pulling a small tool from his belt. He worked quickly, expertly unlocking her restraints. As the last shackle fell from her wrist, Zara stood free for the first time in what felt like forever. Her limbs were stiff, but her mind was sharp with one overwhelming thought: escape. "Come with me," the soldier urged. His voice was soft but commanding. There was no time to waste. Zara nodded, still in disbelief. Could this really be happening? She had thought her life was over, but now she was free. The soldier's calm demeanor made her believe that somehow she might just make it out of this alive. As they moved toward the exit, the tribunal leader's voice rang out once more. "Capture them. Do not let them leave the chamber." The room erupted into chaos. The remaining guards, still disoriented from the blackout, were beginning to stir. But the soldier was already moving, leading Zara through a side door that she hadn't even noticed before. It was narrow, hidden behind a large pillar, and it led to a dark corridor. Zara could hear the sound of heavy footsteps behind them, but the soldier didn't seem worried. His pace remained steady, his eyes scanning every corner, every shadow, as if he already knew the way. Zara's mind raced. Who was he? How had he gotten so deep into the heart of the tribunal's stronghold? Was he really part of a resistance, or was there something more to this man than she realized? "Stay close," the soldier said, his voice low and urgent. Zara did as she was told, her thoughts spinning. She could feel the heat of his body just ahead of her as they moved through the dark hallway. Every sound, every whisper of movement in the shadows felt like an echo of danger. The tribunal would stop at nothing to recapture her, and now that the soldier had involved himself, he was just as much a target. As they rounded a corner, Zara heard something that made her heart race. The sound of boots echoing in the hallway behind them. The soldiers had found their trail. She glanced up at the soldier, who didn't seem panicked at all. Instead, he gave her a quick glance, his eyes telling her that there was no turning back now. They had come too far. "Ready?" he asked, his hand resting on the door ahead of them. Zara nodded, her entire body tensed, ready to fight for her life. This wasn't just about escaping anymore. It was about surviving. And maybe, just maybe, the start of something bigger than she had ever imagined. The escape. The door slammed shut behind them with a loud bang, cutting off the sound of pursuing footsteps for just a moment. The soldier and Zara stood in the narrow corridor, their breaths coming in short, quick bursts. The air was thick with tension, but Zara could feel something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. She had no idea who this man was or where he came from, but he had given her a chance to survive, a chance to escape the cold grip of the tribunal. And now she was running for her life. The soldier's hand gripped her wrist firmly as he pulled her forward, urging her to keep moving. His face was hard, his eyes scanning the darkness ahead. Zara tried to focus on her steps, ignoring the fear that still gnawed at her insides. They moved through the winding hallways of the tribunal's fortress-like stronghold, a maze of corridors that seemed to stretch on forever. The faint sound of their footsteps echoed off the cold, metallic walls, but it wasn't enough to mask the sound of boots behind them. The guards were getting closer. Zara's heart pounded in her chest as she glanced over her shoulder. The soldiers were coming. She could hear them shouting, their voices growing louder with every passing second. The tribunal wasn't going to let them go without a fight. She didn't know how much time they had before the entire base was alerted to their escape. The soldier, though, remained calm, never breaking his stride. He seemed to know exactly where they were going. His eyes darted to every corner, every door, as if he had memorized the entire layout of the fortress. "Keep up," he said, his voice low but urgent. "We're almost there." Zara nodded, but inside, she was trembling. She had never been so close to death before. The tribunal had made it clear, if they caught her, there would be no escape. They wouldn't just kill her, they would make an example of her. They turned another corner, and Zara almost stumbled as they reached a dead end. The corridor was blocked by a heavy steel door, marked with strange alien symbols. Zara's stomach sank. It looked like the end of the line. The soldier didn't hesitate. With practiced ease, he pulled a small device from his belt and inserted it into the door's control panel. Sparks flew as the device connected, and Zara watched in awe as the door slowly began to open, revealing a small hidden passage beyond. "Come on," the soldier urged, stepping into the passage. "We've got to move fast." Zora followed without a word, her mind still spinning. How had he known this door was here? How had he known how to open it? She glanced at him, but he didn't meet her eyes. His focus was on the path ahead, his movements quick and efficient. As they hurried through the narrow passage, the sound of the guards' pursuit grew louder. They were getting closer. Zara's pulse raced. Every second felt like an eternity. Suddenly, a blinding light flashed at the end of the corridor. Zara squinted, trying to make out what was coming. A vehicle, a ship, whatever it was their only chance. The soldier picked up his pace, pulling Zora along with him. They reached the end of the passage just as a sleek, silver shuttle appeared in front of them, its engines humming softly. The door to the shuttle opened, and the soldier shoved Zara inside, following closely behind. Before she could even process what was happening, the door slammed shut, and the shuttle shot into the air, leaving the Tribunal's stronghold far behind. Zara felt a wave of relief wash over her as they soared into the sky. They were free. But the soldier didn't let his guard down. He quickly strapped himself into the pilot's seat, his fingers moving over the controls with precision. Zara sat in the seat next to him, still trying to catch her breath. The fear that had gripped her only moments before began to fade, replaced by a strange mix of confusion and gratitude. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why did you help me?" The soldier didn't answer right away. He adjusted the controls, his eyes flicking to the radar screen. A few seconds later, he looked over at her, his expression unreadable. "I'm someone who can't stand by and watch innocent people suffer," he said quietly. His voice was rough, but there was a sincerity to it that Zara hadn't expected. Zara didn't know what to say. She had always thought of humans as powerless, weak in the face of the aliens' power. But this man was different. He wasn't just a soldier. He was something more. A fighter. A survivor. Just like her. "Why do you care about me?" Zara asked, still not fully understanding. The soldier's lips twisted into a brief, tight smile. "Because you're worth saving, and because I know that we don't stand a chance if we don't help each other." Zora's eyes widened as she processed his words. She had never heard anyone speak like that before. It wasn't just about the fight. It was about something deeper, something that resonated in her soul. Before she could respond, the shuttle's engines roared louder, and the soldier quickly pulled it into a steep climb. The stars outside the window blurred into streaks of light as they shot through the atmosphere, escaping the planet's gravity. Zara felt a sense of freedom she hadn't known in years, but she also knew that the hardest part was yet to come. The Tribunal wouldn't stop. They would come after her, after them both. "Where are we going?" Zara asked, her voice a little steadier now. The soldier looked out the window, his face hardening as he focused on their course. "Somewhere safe, but it won't be for long. The Tribunal won't stop until they find you, and when they do, it'll be worse than before." Zara nodded, her heart sinking once more. The journey wasn't over, not by a long shot, but for the first time, she didn't feel completely alone. And maybe, just maybe, she could fight back. Hunted by the Tribunal. The stars outside the shuttle window twinkled like distant promises, but Zara couldn't shake the cold feeling in her chest. They had escaped, yes, but for how long? The Tribunal's reach was vast. The moment they left the planet's atmosphere, the soldier had already begun making plans to evade detection. But the truth was, Zara knew they wouldn't be safe forever. The shuttle's interior hummed softly, the sound of the engines a constant reminder of their flight. The soldier's hands were steady on the controls, his eyes darting from the radar to the distant stars. His movements were quick, efficient. It was as if he had done this 1,000 times before. Zara, on the other hand, was still reeling from everything that had happened in the last few hours. Her life had been torn apart in a matter of days. One moment, she had been sentenced to death. The next, she was fleeing with a human she barely knew. She didn't know if she could trust him yet, but one thing was certain: he was her only chance. As they climbed higher into the depths of space, the soldier finally spoke, his voice low and urgent. "They'll be after us soon," he said, not looking at her. "The Tribunal doesn't let anyone escape. Once they realize you're gone, they'll send every ship in their fleet after us." Zara felt her stomach tighten at the thought. She had heard stories about the Tribunal's power, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of being hunted. The Tribunal was one of the most formidable forces in the galaxy. They had advanced weapons, fleets of ships, and a ruthless drive to crush anyone who defied them. She was a nobody in their eyes, a traitor who needed to be erased. But she wasn't ready to die yet. Not without a fight. The soldier adjusted their course, glancing at the radar once more. Zara saw a flicker of worry in his eyes, something she hadn't expected. Despite his confident demeanor, she could sense the danger they were in. He wasn't invincible. They weren't invincible. "Are you sure you know how to get us out of here?" Zara asked, her voice hesitant. The soldier's lips tightened into a thin line as he glanced at her. "I do. But that doesn't mean it'll be easy. We've got a few tricks to play. But it's only a matter of time before they find us. We need to buy ourselves some space. Give them the slip. If we don't, we're dead." Zara nodded, trying to steady her nerves. Her hands clenched into fists in her lap. It was hard to keep her thoughts focused. The cold fear that had taken root in her chest kept growing, threatening to overtake her. But then she thought of the Tribunal's cold judgment, of the faces of those who had sentenced her to die without mercy. She couldn't go back. She wouldn't. Suddenly, the radar screen flashed with a warning. "Shit," the soldier muttered under his breath, his eyes flicking to the display. "They've already sent out a fleet. It's not just a few ships. This is a full-scale pursuit. They've locked onto our signature." Zara's breath hitched. "How long do we have?" "Not long enough," the soldier replied. He was already working frantically at the controls. The shuttle dipped and swerved, sharply maneuvering away from the oncoming fleet. "Hold on." The ship jerked violently as it changed direction, shooting past a cluster of asteroids. Zara gripped her seat, her heart racing as the world outside the window became a blur of rocks and debris. She could feel the heat of the engines as they pushed the shuttle to its limits. The soldier's face was focused, his jaw clenched in determination as he weaved through the asteroid field, trying to lose the Tribunal's ships in the chaos of the floating rocks. Zara could see the distant flash of energy blasts, the deadly pursuit just behind them. The Tribunal's ships were closing in fast, their weapons charging. "We can't keep this up for long," the soldier said, his voice grim. "They'll catch us eventually. But I have an idea." Zara glanced at him. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he flipped a switch on the console in front of him. And suddenly, the shuttle's exterior lights blinked off, leaving them in total darkness. The only light came from the soft glow of the instruments inside the cockpit. "What are you doing?" Zara asked, feeling the air grow heavier. "I'm going to play a little trick," he said with a small, confident smirk. "I hope it works." Without warning, he cut the shuttle's engines. The sudden silence was deafening. The shuttle drifted, weightless, among the asteroids. Zara's heart was pounding in her chest as she realized what the soldier was doing. He was trying to hide them in plain sight, using the field of asteroids as cover. The danger wasn't over, though. The Tribunal's ships were still out there, hunting them, scanning the area for any trace of their shuttle. Every minute they stayed hidden was another minute they had to survive. Zara held her breath, waiting for the next move, trying to ignore the fear that clawed at her. Seconds stretched into what felt like hours. The shuttle was completely still, drifting in the vast emptiness of space. Zara's mind raced. What if it didn't work? What if they were found? And then the soldier's voice broke through her thoughts, calm and steady. They've passed us. We're in the clear. Zara exhaled, a rush of relief flooding her chest. They were alive. For now. The soldier didn't let his guard down, though. He flicked the lights back on and slowly started up the engines again, gently pulling them away from the asteroid field. The danger wasn't over yet. The tribunal was relentless, and Zara knew this was just the beginning of a long fight. But for the first time since she had been captured, Zara felt a glimmer of hope. She was alive, and someone cared enough to fight for her. Together, they had managed to escape. And maybe, just maybe, they could keep running long enough to find a way to defeat the tribunal. The soldier glanced over at her, a flicker of something in his eyes, determination, but also a spark of something else. "We're not out of danger yet," he said, his voice low. "But we have a chance." Zara nodded. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she had something worth fighting for. The hunt was on. And this time, it wasn't just her against the universe. It was them. Together. The truth revealed. The shuttle's hum was a low, constant presence as they traveled through the vast, empty expanse of space. Zara sat in her seat, her eyes fixed on the stars outside. They were no longer in danger. At least, not for now. But the weight of what had happened still pressed down on her chest. Her escape had been a blur, a rush of adrenaline and fear, but now, in the relative safety of the shuttle, things were slowing down. Her mind was catching up. Zara's thoughts swirled as she looked across at the soldier. The man who had saved her life. The man who had risked everything to pull her out of the tribunal's grip. He had made a promise to get her out. And he had kept it. But there was still so much she didn't understand. She didn't know who he was, or what he wanted from her. She had no idea why he was helping her, why he would put his life in danger for a prisoner like her. For the first time since their escape, Zara turned toward him and spoke. "Why did you help me?" she asked quietly, her voice shaking slightly. "You could have just let them take me. I'm nobody. I'm nothing." The soldier didn't answer right away. His fingers moved across the console, adjusting the ship's course as he glanced over at her. His expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, something that made Zara feel like there was more to him than he was letting on. Finally, he spoke, his voice steady, yet there was a hint of something beneath the surface. "You're not nothing, Zara. You've never been nothing. The tribunal, well, they've convinced you that you're just a small part of their game, just a tool to be used and discarded. But that's not true. You have value, more value than you know." Zara's brow furrowed. She had never seen herself as anything special. She was just a survivor, fighting to stay alive in a universe that didn't care about her. The idea that she had value was something she couldn't quite grasp. She had been taught that humans were weak, powerless in the face of the alien empires that ruled the galaxy. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, her voice thick with confusion. "Why do you care? You don't even know me." The soldier's lips pressed into a thin line as he paused, staring out at the endless blackness of space. For a moment, he seemed lost in thought, as if deciding how much of the truth he could reveal. "You're right. I don't know you," he said after a long silence. "But I know what the tribunal is capable of. I've seen it firsthand. They don't care about life. They don't care about the people they destroy to maintain their power. And they've done things to me. Things that I can't forget. I'm fighting against them, not just for you, but for everyone they've hurt, including myself." Zara's heart skipped a beat. She had thought of the tribunal as an impersonal, almost faceless entity, a force of nature that simply crushed anything in its path. But now, hearing the soldier's words, she realized the depth of the damage they had caused. He wasn't just some random soldier. He was a victim of their cruelty, just like her. But where she had once given up hope, this man had fought back. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" Zara asked, her voice softening as the pieces started to fall into place. The soldier glanced at her, his expression hardening. "I wasn't ready. I wasn't sure if you believed me, or if it would make a difference. But now," he looked out the window again, his gaze distant. "Now, I think you need to know. The Tribunal's not just hunting you. They're hunting me too." Zara's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" He finally met her gaze, and for the first time, his mask of calm seemed to slip. "I wasn't always a soldier. Before this, I was a civilian, just like you. I had a life, a family. I lived on a colony world that the Tribunal decided to make an example of. They came, destroyed everything. My home, my people, my wife, my daughter. They were just swept aside, as if they were nothing. I was lucky. I survived. But I never stopped fighting. I joined the resistance. I've been working to take them down ever since." Zara was speechless. She had never imagined that the soldier, this man who had risked everything for her, had suffered so much. The Tribunal's cruelty was endless, but hearing it from someone who had lived through it made it real in a way she hadn't understood before. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I had no idea. I thought." Her voice faltered as she searched for the right words. "I thought you were just some soldier following orders. But you're not, are you?" The soldier shook his head. "I'm not. And I don't follow orders anymore. Not unless they align with what I believe in. And right now, that's getting you to safety. We both have a long road ahead of us, Zara, and I don't know what's going to happen. But I do know this. Together, we have a chance to stop the Tribunal. We have a chance to make them pay for everything they've done." Zara's mind reeled with the revelation. She had thought of the Tribunal as something distant, an enemy to be fought from the outside. But now, it was personal. This man, this soldier, had been fighting the same fight she now found herself in, not just for survival, but for justice. And if he was right, they could make a real difference. They could take down the empire that had controlled their lives for so long. For the first time, Zara felt something stir inside her. It wasn't just the cold fear of survival. It was something deeper, something stronger, a resolve. "What do we do next?" she asked, her voice steadier now, more certain than before. The soldier smiled slightly, a glimmer of pride in his eyes. "Next, we keep moving forward. The Tribunal's not going to stop coming for us. But now, we've got the element of surprise. We use it to our advantage." Zara nodded. They weren't just running anymore. They were fighting back. And maybe, just maybe, they had a chance of winning this war, not just for themselves, but for the countless others the Tribunal had crushed under its heel. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were rebels. The battle for freedom. The shuttle floated through the darkness, the soft hum of the engines filling the silence between Zara and the soldier. The stars outside seemed far away, like cold, distant lights in a vast, empty sea. The weight of their conversation hung in the air. They both understood now. This wasn't just about running anymore. It wasn't about surviving alone. It was about fighting back. Zara sat back in her seat, her hands gripping the armrests. She wasn't the same woman who had been sentenced to die in the Tribunal's chamber. She had a purpose now, a reason to keep going. The soldier's words echoed in her mind. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for justice. The soldier, whose name she still didn't know, was focused on the controls, his eyes scanning the radar. He had become more than just her rescuer. He was her ally. In a universe that had shown her nothing but cruelty, he was the one person who had given her hope. And now, they were about to do something that could change everything. "We're getting close," the soldier said, his voice breaking the silence. "The resistance is waiting for us." Zara's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't realized how close they were to the next phase of their plan. She had never been a part of anything like this. Real rebellion, real resistance. But the soldier's confidence steadied her nerves. She trusted him, even if she didn't understand everything yet. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice tight with anticipation. The soldier's lips curved into a small, grim smile. To a place where the Tribunal's reach doesn't go. A safe house, a base of operations for the resistance. We need to regroup, rearm, and make our next move. We've got an advantage, but it won't last long. The Tribunal won't give up. Zara nodded. The Tribunal had endless resources, and they would stop at nothing to find them. But she was done running. She wasn't going to let them take everything from her again. The shuttle suddenly jolted, and the calmness in the air was shattered. Zara's heart raced as the soldier's hands moved swiftly over the controls. "We've been tracked," he muttered, his voice sharp. "They're closing in on us." Zara's eyes widened. "What are we going to do?" "Stay calm," he replied, his voice unwavering. "We're not dead yet." The soldier's hands flew over the controls, and the shuttle veered hard to the left, narrowly avoiding a blast of energy that cut through the empty space where they had been. The flashing lights outside the window revealed the unmistakable silhouette of a Tribunal warship, its massive frame ominous against the void of space. They had found them. Zara felt the familiar knot of fear tighten in her stomach. But this time, it was different. She wasn't just the helpless prisoner anymore. She had a role to play. She had to survive. She had to fight. The soldier activated the ship's thrusters, and they shot forward, narrowly avoiding another round of fire. The ship rocked violently as they swerved through the debris-filled sector of space, weaving in and out of asteroids and abandoned satellites. The soldier's skill at piloting the shuttle was unmatched. He was fast, calculating, and precise. Zara couldn't help but admire his ability to stay cool under pressure. As they passed through a narrow gap between two massive asteroids, Zora's eyes locked on the warship tailing them. It was closing in fast. It was only a matter of time before they were caught. "Hold on," the soldier said, gritting his teeth. "This is going to get bumpy." Without warning, he flipped the shuttle onto its side, sending it spiraling through a dangerous field of debris. Zara gripped her seat as they dodged falling chunks of metal and destroyed ships. The warship was relentless in its pursuit, its weapons lighting up the sky with deadly energy beams. "We've got to get to the resistance," Zara said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We can't outrun them forever." "I know," the soldier said. "We're not trying to outrun them. We're trying to make them think we're dead." Zara blinked. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, his fingers moved over the control panel, and he activated a hidden compartment inside the shuttle. A small device slid out, glowing faintly with an eerie blue light. "It's a signal jammer," he explained quickly. "It will make it look like we've been destroyed. The warship will think we're gone, and they'll stop searching for us." Zara stared at the device, her eyes widening. It seemed so simple, yet so brilliant. "You think that will work?" "Either that, or they'll blast us out of the sky," he replied with a cold smile. "But it's our best shot." The soldier activated the jammer, and for a moment, everything went still. The shuttle's engines powered down, the hum of its machinery fading into silence. They were drifting, just another piece of space debris. The warship loomed closer, its massive size dwarfing the shuttle. Zara's pulse hammered in her ears as she held her breath. The soldier's hand rested lightly on the controls, ready to act at a moment's notice. It was a gamble, a dangerous one, but it was their only chance. For what felt like an eternity, the shuttle floated, silent and motionless. The warship's sensors must have been receiving false readings. Zara could only pray that the Tribunal hadn't figured out the trick. And then, finally, the warship began to move away. Its engines fired up, and the colossal ship turned slowly, disappearing into the dark expanse of space. Zara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "We did it," she whispered, staring out at the empty space where the warship had just been. It was over. For now. The soldier's hand relaxed on the controls, and the shuttle's engines roared back to life. "Not yet. We've still got work to do." The relief was short-lived, But Zara knew this was just a temporary victory. They had escaped death, but they still had a long road ahead of them. They had to join the resistance, gather support, and prepare for the battles to come. But as she looked over at the soldier, she realized something. This fight, this battle, wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about freedom. It was about taking back their future from an empire that had stolen everything from them. And Zara was ready. Ready to fight. Ready to win. Victory and a new beginning. The shuttle's engines hummed steadily as the stars streaked by, now distant memories of the chase behind them. Zara sat beside the soldier, her body still tense from the adrenaline of their near escape. The vast expanse of space lay before them, silent and endless. But for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Zara could breathe a little easier. "We're almost there," the soldier said, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, though there was a weariness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. The constant running, the battles, the danger, it had taken its toll on them both. But they weren't done yet. Not by a long shot. "Where exactly is there?" Zara asked, her voice steady, though she couldn't hide the curiosity in her tone. After everything they had been through, she needed to know what was next. She needed to understand why she was risking everything, and what the soldier's plan truly was. He glanced at her, his face softening just slightly. "A safe house, a hidden base of operations for the resistance. It's out of the Tribunal's reach, for now. We'll meet with others, people who've been fighting the Tribunal from the inside. We'll figure out the next steps." Zara nodded, her heart thudding with a mix of hope and apprehension. The future was uncertain, but she had come this far. And in the soldier's eyes, she saw something she hadn't seen before: belief. In her. In the mission they were on. He wasn't just helping her for some personal gain. They were in this together, as equals, as allies. The shuttle's course took them toward a small moon in the outer rim, where the coordinates the soldier had provided led them to an ancient-looking base hidden within its craggy surface. Zara's breath caught in her throat as they approached. The base was concealed, an outpost camouflaged by the moon's natural terrain. It wasn't much, at least it didn't look like much from the outside. But Zara could sense the life within it. The resistance. They were here. They were waiting. As the shuttle descended, Zara couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. This was the end of one journey, and the beginning of another. She was leaving behind the life of a prisoner, a fugitive, and stepping into something far more uncertain. But for the first time, she didn't feel like she was alone. The soldier had been her anchor in this storm, and together, they were about to make their stand. The shuttle touched down with a soft thud, and the hatch opened. Zara stepped out, her boots crunching against the cold, rocky surface. The air inside the base was stale but welcome. As she stepped into the dimly lit corridor, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the many eyes that were watching them. A tall figure emerged from the shadows, a woman dressed in the same dark, utilitarian clothing the soldier wore. She had sharp, calculating eyes, but when she saw the soldier, her expression softened. "Welcome back," she said, her voice low but warm. "I see you brought a friend." Zara stepped forward, her heart racing as she looked at the woman, who seemed to have the same level of authority as the soldier. She was part of the resistance, part of something bigger. This was it, the moment Zara had been waiting for. She was no longer a captive. She was a part of something that could change the course of their future. The soldier nodded, stepping aside. "This is Zara. She's one of us now." The woman's gaze shifted to Zara, sizing her up in an instant, but there was no judgment in her eyes. There was only recognition, understanding. "Glad to have you with us," she said simply. The soldier led Zara through the base, explaining the layout and introducing her to the others who had gathered there. There were more of them, more rebels, more survivors of the Tribunal's tyranny. Each face Zara saw told its own story of loss, pain, and resilience. But none of them had given up. None of them had surrendered. They were here for a reason, to take back their freedom. Zara's pulse quickened as the reality of what was ahead began to settle in. They had the power to strike back, to disrupt the Tribunal's control, one small victory at a time. But it wouldn't be easy. There would be more battles, more danger. The Tribunal would never stop hunting them. But for the first time, Zara believed they could win. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was a fighter. That night, the base hummed with quiet activity as plans were laid, strategies discussed, and weapons prepared. Zara listened in, her mind absorbing everything. She had no military training, but she was quick to learn. Every face around her was filled with purpose. These people weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting to change everything. As she sat in a corner of the base later that evening, alone with her thoughts, the soldier found her. He sat beside her without a word, his presence a comfort. There were no words between them for a long time, but Zara didn't need to speak. She knew what he was thinking, what they were both thinking. "We're going to win, aren't we?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The soldier's eyes met hers, and for the first time, he allowed a small, genuine smile to tug at his lips. "Yes," he said simply. "We are." Zara took a deep breath, her chest swelling with a sense of purpose. She had been lost for so long, caught in a world that had no place for her. But now, as she looked around at the resistance, she knew she was part of something greater than herself, a movement that had the power to change the galaxy. She wasn't just fighting for her own survival anymore. She was fighting for freedom, for those who couldn't fight for themselves. And for the first time, Zara felt a sense of peace settle over her. She was no longer alone. And she wasn't running anymore. She was ready.